to move.
Thank you, Count Corlett, for the opportunity to respond, and I want to acknowledge the deputies for placing the motion here in front of this evening, which I and the government will not be supporting, and I'll outline why. But before I outline why, I want to open up by saying that nobody in this House, including the deputies who are putting this motion forward, have a monopoly on understanding the difficulty and anxiety that citizens can face and moving an amendment. Yes,
amendment
thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
Nobody, including the deputies who are putting forward this motion, have a monopoly on understanding the anxiety that people face who are in mortgage difficulty. It is an anxiety that I well understand. It is an anxiety that I share. I understand the challenge that our citizens face when they face a mortgage difficulty. And I'd like to particularly say to Deputy Healy-Rae and his reference to the Taoiseach, anybody who has the ability to be re-elected to this House has more than enough stock of experience of the appreciation that constituents face. And for you to suggest otherwise is unworthy of you. You also made the point in relation to nothing being done, as was also said by Deputy Harty. I'll touch on that in a moment. But before I do that, you raised the issue in relation to why I did not support a community banking organisation and the development of it beyond what is there. I'll reiterate to you, Deputy, what I've said before on the issue. If anybody, maybe even including yourself, is willing to raise the money to fund the idea, I'm happy to look at it. But I am not in the business of reinvesting the Irish taxpayers' money into activities to create lending when we still have billions of euro absorbed in banks, and I want to get that money back. But Deputy, if those who are putting forward this idea think it's such a good idea, perhaps they would be willing to put their own capital and their own money on the table to make it happen. And when they do that, I'll be happy to sit down again and look at the idea, as I have said I will do. I'll deal with the points that Deputy Harty made, and I would have hoped from you, Deputy, I'm sorry you couldn't do it this evening, that there would have been some acknowledgement of progress made. You said that we were failing. It's up to the people to determine whether we are failing or not. And I hope those who look at progress that has been made, and I had hoped, Deputy, because no,
the Minister listened attentively to you people, and I want you to listen to the Minister.
I always seem to rile Deputy McGrath when I put facts in front of him. So I'm used to the interruptions, but I will continue on, last Count Corlett. I would have hoped from you, Deputy Harty, that there would have been a broader appreciation of the facts in relation to this, which you didn't feel able to offer on this occasion. Because in restating my anxiety, my understanding of the anxiety and worry that citizens face when dealing with this, which I share with you, I would have hoped at some point in your contribution, which tend to be on other matters fair-minded, you would have acknowledged, for example, as the counter-motion does, that over the last number of years, we have seen the number of people in mortgage arrears nearly half. Progress like this was deemed impossible. Now, this isn't to invalidate the worry and concern that those have who are still in arrears. It's not to invalidate it, but not to suggest that no progress has been made or nothing is done is not commensurate with the change that has happened in our economy and in our society. I would have hoped, at least you, Deputy, I don't hold any hope for Deputy McGrath in relation to this, might have acknowledged the fact that 115,000 mortgage accounts have been restructured. This has happened because the government, this House, recognises the worry and the need to respond back to this issue, to the personal crises that too many faced. And I would have hoped that there would at least have been some recognition that the level of arrears in our country have now declined in 21 consecutive quarters. The fact that there's no acknowledgement of this in the motion or the speeches to date is why I am putting forward my own motion. What have we done before I deal with the issue of the purchase of loan books by equity funds? What have we done? We have brought in, with constructive input from this House, personal insolvency legislation. We have established a WALIA. A WALIA has issued 10,000 vouchers to provide support to citizens in distress. The personal insolvency legislation has led to, for those who have secured personal insolvency arrangements, 95% of those who access those arrangements staying in their home. In addition to this, we have put in place legislation, particularly the Consumer Protection Act of 2015, which was then amended, and I was happy to work with Deputy McGrath on this, because he identified an issue that I accepted need to be addressed. Put in place 2 pieces of legislation, one initiated by the government, one initiated by Deputy McGrath, to ensure that any entity that is operating in our country that has access to and ownership of our loan book is subject to the regulation of the central bank. And we also have put in place, and I asked, that the Code of Conduct of Mortgage Arrears be reviewed to look at the issues of, are those who have their loan book sold, are they treated differently from those who have their loan books held by banks? This was independently done by the central bank, and they recommended that the Code of Conduct of Mortgage Arrears, as it is, be left unchanged. We also have, in front of the Oireachtas at the moment, the Land and Conveyancing Law Reform Bill, acknowledged by none to date. The whole purpose of this bill is to ensure that the previous legislation of 2013 is amended and is strengthened to further strike the balance between citizens who are in debt difficulty, in debt distress in our courts, and are finding themselves facing great difficulty. And we have put the legislation in place now to again ensure that the right balance is struck between those in difficulty and the broader obligations and needs that banks have in relation to how they look to manage themselves. I am on the side of fairness. I'm on the side of making sure people are treated fairly, both those who have mortgages, but also those who need them, also those who are paying for them. And I'd address a point that Deputy Healy-Rae identified when he was asking, why isn't more credit available? Deputy, I'd ask you, do you think, and you may acknowledge it, that there could be a link between the fact that we still have one of the highest level of non-performing loans of any country in the European Union, and the fact that there is still an appetite for more credit from our banks? They are related. They are related. We are a country, we're an economy that has gone through now a number of years of employment growth, of income growth. For a number of our banks, they still have a level of non-performing loan that is very, very high versus the European average. And we went through many years in which opposition speakers and me and many in this House criticised the fact that we either didn't have an independent bank regulator, or if we did have one, that they didn't have enough power, and if they didn't have enough power, that they weren't using it. Well, that is now in place, and that has consequences. One of the consequences of this is our regulators, led by and represented by the Central Bank of Ireland, are saying that banks, particularly at a time of relative economic recovery and stability, need to do more to make sure that balance sheets are safe. As Minister for Finance, I understand the need for that to happen, but what I also understand is those who are in difficulty, who are in distress, who find themselves facing really grievous worry regarding their futures because of the level of debt that they have, that they need protection and that they need to be treated fairly as well. The 2015 Act, the 2018 Act, the 2013 Land and Conveyancing Act, the current one that has been revised at the moment, the Code of Conduct of Mortgage Arrears, all of these have contributed to a very significant amount of mortgage restructuring to alleviate our citizens from difficulty. And I will continue to work with those who want to be constructive on this to see are there ways in which we can continue to get that balance right. Those who are in difficulty need to be and must be treated fairly. We will look, and I will continue to look, at ways in which this could be done, but let's acknowledge what has happened. Let's also acknowledge the progress that has been made, and let's also acknowledge that we do need to find, in a fair way, ways to ensure that our banks can meet the needs of today and of tomorrow.